We're swinging back again from an era when everybody thought that globalization was inevitable to a period when people think that there's really a big problem with globalization, and more governments, but also political movements, commentators, people on the street are thinking that globalization just isn't working.
And what does that mean? I mean, what are the pragmatic implications for all of us?
Globalization involved the movement of goods, of trade, in other words, commerce, but also the movement of capital and the movement of people. And anti-globalization movements really aim at limiting all those kinds of movements. But I think the movement at the moment is particularly directed against migration, against people coming in, and there are all kinds of fears, cultural fears, security fears about migration, but also at the base of that fear there's an economic fear that migration is leading to a loss of jobs.
And then your point has been that these kind of things tend to happen every 60, 70 years or so, do they? And we're now in one of those swings, are we?
Well, characteristically, they happen in the aftermath of big financial crises. And so I think there have been really three big movements against globalization. One after a crisis that not many people know about in 1907, one after the Great Depression, and the one that we're in at the moment is the aftermath of the global financial crisis of 2008.
This is a kind of historic moment, in other words, and some people like to compare it to the 1930s. Do you think that those are fair comparisons, and that they are rather scary comparisons, are they not?
They're very scary comparisons, but I think it is a fair comparison, and you can see something that is analogous to the story of the 1920s and 1930s. That is that the parties in the political middle and the centre are on the whole in favour of openness, in favour of trade, in favour of migration, but they're squeezed both from the right and from the left, and that it's often difficult to tell what the distinction is between anti-globalization movements on the right and anti-globalization movements on the left.
And some have essentially used Brexit and President Trump in the same sentence. Do you think they are part of the same phenomenon?
They're absolutely part of the same phenomenon, and they share something, I think, that is that they're both fundamentally rather ambiguous about globalization. So some of the people who wanted Brexit wanted it because they thought Britain could be more open, more global, without all the shackles of the European Union. And some people who wanted Brexit wanted to protect Britain from migration and from trade. And you get exactly the same story with the Trump administration, that some people are in favor of opening, but some people, in particular the new chair of the National Trade Council, is very much in favor of restricting global competition.
And if indeed we are looking at a situation that's very similar to the 1930s, what is to prevent us slipping into what David Cameron called World War III? I mean, people thought he was being hyperbolic, but is that a serious threat?
I think it is absolutely a serious threat. And in that sense, I think the aftermath of 1907 is as interesting as the 1930s, because after 1907, the foreign ministries, the defense ministries, intelligence agencies started to operationalize information, to think that information was essential to the control of military events. And there was a kind of arms race in terms of communications control. And we're seeing that kind of arms race at the moment, I think. And the story of unconventional warfare, of the role of Google, the role of Apple, those all feed into this debate about whether communications can be controlled in the interests of national security.